Okay, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. All right. Maria, can you unmute conference room B?
Yep, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Excellent.
What is a physical quorum looking like in conference room
Yeah,
B?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have quorum.
We have a quorum. All right. Well, we can go ahead and get started with today's meeting. Is Jennifer Smith in the
She is not present in
she's
the.
not present? Okay. Well, today's presentation, I'll go ahead and move on to the agenda.
I
But
don't see her online yet either, so she must be en route because I haven't heard
Okay.
anything.
Okay, well, maybe we should give a few more minutes for them. I know Will Weiss is going to be there in person. I'm not sure if he's there yet
If we
either,
have
but
a quorum already, let's go ahead and get started. I want to respect everybody's time.
okay, that sounds good. When we do get to the core of the presentation, though, it will be the Lake County Cannabis Alliance and Jennifer Smith presenting. So hopefully
Great, and
she'll
Will
be
is
there.
here now too. He just
Okay, perfect.
You want to sit in the big fancy chair?
So we're going to go through a roll call of task force members today. Consideration of the minutes. Looks like from May 8th, we've had a few issues with some minutes, and I'll address some of the stuff on where to find those documents online.
Hey, Andrew,
Yes?
my agenda says May 22nd minutes.
Yeah, perhaps this PowerPoint just was not updated. Looks like I have an agenda here for today that I can share, and we do have May 22nd.
Okay, are those ready or do we not get those?
They are available online. There's been some confusion as to where to find those. In the past, we had been sending out that courtesy email with all of the attachments, but now that we're fully staffed and other people are taking over different parts of the responsibilities, we just want to make sure people know where to access those online, which I can go over when we get to that point.
Super,
But
and Robert Geary is also now present.
I see that. All right, let's go ahead and get to our roll call of the task force members. For everyone present, give me 1 second. Okay, roll call of task force members present. William Weiss,
Present.
Jan Coppinger,
Present.
Catherine Vanderwall,
Here.
Rebecca Harper,
Present.
Jennifer Smith,
Not yet.
not present yet. Nara Dalbaca,
Present.
Robert Geary,
Present.
and our fire chief representative. I think Chief Cepeda is going to be in person today.
I'm here.
Oh, okay. I heard a voice.
Oh, that was me saying hi to Sarah.
Okay. And Sarah's here. All right. Well, maybe Sarah can help fill in a little bit for Jennifer until she gets. Okay. Moving on with consideration of minutes from, and again on the agenda, it was May 22nd meeting, but I wanted to cover a few things moving forward. The agendas will be posted 72 hours ahead of the meeting. That's Friday at 1 p.m. ahead of our Monday 1 p.m. meeting, as well as the draft minutes. On all of the agendas for the past few months, you're able to access these documents through these links here. They're pretty straightforward. The Cannabis Task Force agenda and minutes can be found through this link. Our municipal code, which we often reference, can be found here. Other ordinances and resolutions that are cannabis related, such as the Farmland Protection Zone or hydrology requirements, can be found through this link. And then other documents related to our task force presentations are at this following link. So I do want to share a screen real quick of a browser so you can kind of see what that looks like. So especially this page, I think this is where some of the confusion was being caught. So this is where our agenda lives online. If you follow that first link for agendas and minutes, you can find the most recent agenda here. And then the minutes, again, because we're in the meeting right now, the draft minutes for this will be located here. The June 5th meeting we could not hold because we did not have a physical quorum in presence at the courthouse. So we adjourned that meeting. The minutes that are still linked here, and I'm going to have to work with Ruby a little bit. She's not present. She's out sick today. But these are still the May 22nd meeting, or minutes from both of those meetings, which will need to be reviewed. So for future reference, you can always go online to this link, find out where to find the agendas and where to find the draft minutes, or then they will be replaced with the approved minutes as amended as needed. So just wanted to get through that quickly. If there's any questions regarding that, I guess I can open up to public comment briefly.
Yep, one question. So the minutes, we want won't really know if they're approved or not. They're just gonna be up there every 2 weeks. And,
Well-
there's nothing that distinguishes draft between,
Well, we shouldn't be posting the minutes there until they are approved.
Until they are.
Prior to
Okay.
that, they would be attached to an agenda for approval, but they would be draft.
Correct. That is something that I had wanted to work out with Ruby this morning ahead of today's meeting. We will also still be sending out, just like we would for Planning Commission, we send out an email to all the commissioners with the agenda packages. We will be sending those out to the task force members as well, so they have everything. But the general public will be able to find all of those resources online, just as they would for a Planning Commission hearing or Board of Supervisor meeting. So just wanted to clarify that moving forward. So. Okay, with that said, I'm going to bring this over here and do this as well. So, was everyone able to locate and review the May 22nd draft minutes online?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, well, now is the time for consideration of those May 22nd meeting minutes.
Anyone have questions or comments? If not, we'll go ahead and take a motion. Oh, wait. Anybody from the public want to speak to the May 22nd minutes?
We have a hand raised. Holly Harris, I'm going to ask you to unmute.
No, I'm sorry. Actually, it was the May 8th one that I wanted to speak about.
Okay.
Do we have, are we?
We have a couple, yeah, that's a typographical error. The posted agenda said May 22nd. So that's all we have right now, but I do think that we're behind a couple sets of minutes.
As in, we also need to review and approve May 8th, is that what you're saying? Or,
I think that's where the original
I think so.
confusion occurred as to where to find those May 8th meetings because they weren't attached to that outgoing email.
All right.
At that
so
point.
we have not approved May 8th then yet, right?
Do not believe so.
Okay, so we'll make sure we get that on, and we'll get that confirmed when Ruby gets back, and add the 8th to the next meeting if we haven't already approved it.
I'd like to thank everyone for their patience through this as we get new staff caught up to speed.
but then that would leave the matter at hand being the May 22nd minutes.
It's still on today's posted agenda.
Great.
So if everyone had a chance to review, no one has any questions, no questions in the Zoom room, we'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve the May 22nd meeting minutes.
Cool, that was
Second.
Rebecca, and second by Nara.
You want to do a roll call vote
Yes,
or?
please.
Okay.
Actually, do we have any voters? We don't have any members online, right?
No,
So we don't
I'm
have to
looking
do
at
roll
the Zoom.
call.
Yeah, we can,
We're all here.
yeah, everyone is
All right,
physically
we're shifting
present.
back to like pre-COVID. It's kinda- All right, so all those who are for or to approve, unanimous showing by hands. Very good.
And we will make sure that we will have the May 8th minutes and the June 12th, today's minutes, available at our next meeting. Okay, moving on with the meeting today, getting into our main topic, basically reviewing and making a motion on the zoning and licenses recommendations as brought forward by the Lake County Cannabis Alliance and discussed by the task force. Sarah Bodner, did Jennifer Smith make it yet?
Not yet.
I see her.
Oh,
Okay.
yay.
Here she is.
Timing. All right, Jennifer Smith is present at 109.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop my video. Much of the rest of the presentation, I'm going to let Jennifer and Sarah take the lead on and just let me know when to go to the next slide and I'll respond accordingly.
I can't see that far.
Do you want to switch?
Do you mind?
No, that's fine. I
Wanna
thought,
sit here so
I wanted
that-
you to be right in front and center on camera.
I prefer not to, but I
Not
don't have my
president.
glasses.
Do you have printouts for everybody?
No.
We will get them. One moment. Oh, wait, I don't have printouts.
I
You mean
have,
the attachments?
I have a set of printouts.
Sorry, I can have Sarah
let me
work
see
on
that
getting those
while
printed and handed
I'm
out.
driving,
real
if
quick.
you don't mind. And then, would it be helpful, I guess the question is, it's so good to see everybody here.
Right.
Did folks have a chance to review the zoning table and feel comfortable with it enough to follow along on screen? Or does anybody really want to print it out while we're chatting?
If a printout was handy, I would like one, but if somebody has to run and make copies, I can get by with
I can just run down to the board office.
Is that easy?
Oh, yeah.
Do we need to pause the discussion while you do that, or shall I?
Oh, just go ahead and get started. I'll be
Okay.
right back in a couple
Cool.
minutes.
So, Jen, are these the same?
I made 2 copies of.
Okay, so I'll give you this
Thank you.
and,
Those don't look the same.
okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay. Okay. Shall we go to the next slide, Andrew? Since
Okay.
Yes, I kind of want to see it to see. All right. Jen, do you want to introduce the process that we did?
Yeah, so what we did is, on the left-hand side, you'll see every license type that is available in the state of California. And then you'll see the different zones that we have in, I just almost said the United States, in Lake County. Where you see an O, a 0, an empty circle, or I think it's a square, I actually can't even read this, represents something that is already existing within the regulations, and those denote whether it is a minor use permit or a major use permit. There are some black R's on here, and those represent the recommendations that this group has already put forth through the dispensary recommendations a few months ago. And then the red R's are what we're really here to discuss today, and those are license types that either have not been offered yet, or we would like to, or we suggest expanding the zoning in which they are available. I'm gonna have to pull up a digital copy of this myself because I can't read that far. So
Just,
huh?
I was just gonna say, feel free to just say next slide when you're ready.
Hey, Andrew.
Is the next slide the PowerPoint?
Yes, here, I can give you a little
Okay,
preview.
that I can read, thank you.
Okay, do you,
Sorry to interrupt, but Andrew, if you can contact Maria, I just realized that the printout that Jen brought puts everything with the exact same formatting, and there's no distinction. So whatever version, it just didn't sync and it downloads, so we can't use this one. So you can
Okay.
go off of making copies, because it doesn't show the R's, or it just.
Yeah, she has a copy that has the R's,
I also believe, and I'll go ahead and bring it
but she
up.
has a different one too.
She has a different one?
1 second.
I believe so.
We need the one that's up on the screen, if it's possible for her to.
Also on that agenda for that link, for anyone who wants to go and reference it, we have all attachments ready and available by link. So I think some of these have been uploaded over here. Just
How do you get there?
on all of the agendas, let me pull up this agenda. So again, all agendas, we've had this on there since about late April moving forward. Agendas and minutes through this link. Again, Article 27, since we reference it so much, is always going to be on there. Ordinances and resolutions are here. And then that page is here for Cannabis Ordinance Task Force resource documents from meetings. So that final link on all of the agendas that are being circulated, you can get to that link. And that page looks like this. So here, the license and zoning recommendation. So if I click on that, this will come up. So I think this one's a little different than the one that made it into the PowerPoint.
That's the one you want.
Yeah, let's see, does it have the R's? Or is it all just dots?
No, it has R's.
Okay, cool.
Oh, I was talking about the screen.
No, this one, it's just all dots. Do you guys see any R's on the chart?
There's one, like I can see it
The
on
first one has ours.
Okay, great.
Very tiny.
I don't. I do have that. Okay, ignore the other one that just has dots. Apologies for any confusion with this. It is, most of what the planners have to do is format Microsoft Word. It's a lot of work. So this table isn't new, and what we're gonna talk about here today is also not new for everybody. We've talked through all of the zonings at great length when we went through the retail process, and then, and the uses that are already permitted in these zones. But if there's any questions about that, I have resource documents. So if we're talking, for example, about like C1 and a particular use, we can cross-reference that with other uses that the county already allows. And we have discussed these zones and the new uses at previous meetings, but it was never agendized for a vote by the task force. So I don't think there's going to be any surprises here today in what LCCA proposes, but there may be questions about what are the implications of that, what does that look like? And the goal is that today as a task force, you could vote on, do you think those uses are permissible uses in these zones? And that's really like the first step. When we talk about base zoning, that's the first thing that allows you to explore a use in that zone. But there are many other things that determine the parameters around uses. And that's in the, it can be in the conditions of approval, if it's a case-by-case basis, or conditions that the county wants to put on it. So, for example, if we're talking about consumption lounges, they're saying it's allowed in these zones is the first step, but there could be a number of other restrictions. There could be setback requirements, there could be rules about visibility from public. If you're going to allow consumption lounge, there could be rules about the HVAC system that you're going to require inside of a consumption lounge if it's indoors to ensure public safety. So there's a whole bunch of other things that probably CDD will weigh on as it goes through the process. And I don't expect all of that to be written here today, but that's it. What I'm saying is it's not just carte blanche for those things to exist. And there's a bunch of other things which would go into the facilities ordinance. And we have examples of language that's been used in other counties that have passed these types of uses. So that might be something that this task force wants to discuss, as we say, okay, we like that in that zone, but we'd like to put some other parameters around it. And I'm sure CDD, the Planning Commission, and the board will weigh in on that in the future, just to.
So on your copy here, you have O's and R's on the copy here.
So on the top line, the O.
Yeah.
So the O means it's already existing.
Right.
And the R is
It's not
is
on this.
recommended.
Recommend it.
It also actually looks like the O is a minor use permit.
Yeah, I wanted to clarify that.
It
And
These,
the dot with
I-
the square next to it looks like the major use permit.
Correct.
Okay.
It looks like there's some other formatting screw ups. So one other thing that happens is sometimes with different versions of Word, things don't transition over correctly.
Mm-hmm.
What we mean here by this is expanded more in the slide, that the type 4 license, which also the formatting is screwed up here, on line number 1, it says type 1, type
That's
2, and type
nursery,
4.
right?
Yeah, type 4 is the nursery, and one of our recommendations and why it says O-R on the version that you have in your hand that you're holding is we want to expand the ability to get a nursery permit in some new zones. And so it's already licensed type 1 and 2 are already permitted in those zones. That's
All right.
cultivation.
How come it says 412?
I think that's supposed to be an asterisk, that the 12 on the zoning chart.
Right.
Yeah, because this is available in PDF. So it's like downloading the
Got
PDF
it.
that someone made a long time ago, converting it to Word where some of the formatting doesn't translate that well. But in our ordinance currently, it would look like this. So for type 4 nursery, there's been a lot of some confusion in the past that it wasn't allowed. And that was mainly due to some of the language that DCC had in their ordinance, in addition to how we had our micro business set up and the way past staff had interpreted that. When DCC changed their regulations, as far as especially having any cultivation be on a separate premise, the way that the old definition described it as a separate entity, which also can work both ways, but clearing it up this past spring with DCC, they have no issue with cultivators having also a nursery as well, just so long as they could be on the same property, the same parcel, but separate distinct premises within those. And we just had the first one approved this past Thursday in that situation. So it is available here. It's with a minor use permit in APZ, Ag, Timber Preserve, Rural Lands, Rural Residential, and Suburban Reserve. And then I believe Sarah and Jen's recommendation is to open it up into a few more options. It looks like C3, M1, M2, and MP.
Yeah, exactly. So that's great that we don't even need, if you say the current interpretation with DCC allows it, then we don't even need to recommend that use if it's already available in those zones under a minor use permit. And we can talk about the new zones we'd like to open it up in as well, and why there's more and more need for commercial cannabis nurseries here and across the state. So we'll get into that when we get to that slide. Apologies for some of the formatting confusion, but we do have concrete recommendations that we can clarify in each zone for each license type as we walk through them. I think we should probably jump into the presentation and hopefully unconfuse people.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about this one, Jen, and why we need more nurseries and why we have these?
Yeah,
regs?
I'll go ahead. So type 4 nursery, this is a retail, actually, sorry, not even retail. This is a commercial nursery. This is a nursery that can supply plants license to license, so that not every farmer wants to grow their own starts or teens. This is essential because we are facing a few different diseases in the state right now in cannabis specific. One is the hop latent viroid. The other is beet top curly root top, something like that. I can't keep my acronyms straight. Both of them affect the plant. You don't know that you really have it unless you've tested for it until you're about 10 weeks into taking care of your plants. So it affects yields, it affects quality. I can speak specifically to this. We lost 1,800 plants to hop latent last year. You have to test from, the best place is to test when the plants are new and to pull the samples from the root material. However, you have to test every single plant, and each test is $200, so it's not feasible to test every plant. There are diseases like this in pretty much any type of crop. This has come to cannabis through the hop plant, which is the most similar related genetically to the cannabis plant. So by allowing commercial nurseries, which are, per Andrew are already allowed, but expanding the zoning, we'll be able to have local access to plants. The other thing that makes that important is that these plants will be started in an environment similar to what they're going to be grown in. Currently, we pull all of our plants out of Salinas, which is cooler, grayer climate, and then we bring it up to this hot, excuse me? Oh, sorry. And we bring it up to this hot, dry climate, and there's a transition period, and sometimes there's a shock period. And what happens with especially hop latent is it's latent, and so all of your plants could have it, and you could never see any symptoms or have any effects from it until it goes under stress. And the heat that we've had, especially in the last 2 years, like it was triple digits this time last year, is a stress event and causes that viroid to pop, we call it. So we're seeing astronomical rates of it.
So why wouldn't it be retail if they're going to be selling to other growers?
Because it's commercial, because it's licensed to license.
But they're still selling it to another license.
It is, but retail we think of as consumer facing. So there is a license type where somebody could sell clone plants to a non-licensed personal grower. They could sell them 6 plants at a time.
So am I right, wouldn't that still fall into the same requirements as any retail?
No, retail is where the public comes in.
Right.
Nursery is only licensee to licensee. So they're selling to the growers
But they're still selling.
or selling
Yeah.
to the retailers. Well, everybody sells along the way, you know, like
I'm just
when
trying
you're
to figure out how it
cultivating.
would fit into
One key
our
factor is all the
process.
Yeah, so even if you're cultivating, you're selling at harvest time. So the sales do take place, but this is not a public storefront or delivery type of option. So in that it's different from the
But
retail
She just
license.
said non-licensed growers could come in and buy.
That's a whole separate license type you have to have.
You have to get a type 9 or 10 in order to sell. So
Also, one other detail is that all of our cultivation license, whether outdoor, mixed light, or indoor, and the variations of those, are taxed on square footage, whereas nurseries would be taxed on the gross receipts of the sales of those clones or propagated plants. So
So
Is it excuse me, is it off of the sales or the propagated plants, Andrew?
I'm sorry. I guess we haven't opened up public comment, but just to clarify that, all cultivation licenses are taxed on square footage of their cultivation, whereas nurseries would be on gross receipts of those, let's say, clones. You're a nursery, you're selling clones, you're delivering clones to other distributors. There's an exchange, and then the tax, I believe, is based on the gross receipts of that. I'll have to double check that with the tax office, but I'm pretty sure that's how it's done.
Okay, sorry, you cut out.
Yes, gross receipts, Valerie. So
I was gonna ask a similar question, just because it seems, especially if there are situations allowable where a nursery and a cultivation site could be the same thing, but just distinct, you phrase that.
Premises.
Distinct premises, but the same parcel or something like that. If it was taxed based on propagated plants, but you were using them yourself, that would be very different than gross receipts, right? It would just seem like a drastic difference.
So you could have your own nursery space.
Sure.
With your cultivation license, so.
You can.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, the routine or the way we get through these items in a single day is we go with the presentation first, and then there will be questions taken from the task force. We will then definitely open it up for public input and questions at that time before we bring it back for a decision. So if you are not a member of the task force, please feel free to keep yourself muted until we get to the public input part. Thank you. Keep going, please.
So our new recommendations for the commercial nursery would be to bring it into all of the ag zones where we currently have cultivation, which would be the APZ, the A, the TPZ, the RL, RR, SR, and then open it up to M1, M2, MP, and then a major use in C3.
And the reasoning behind expanding the zoning here is that there's more and more demand for nursery stock. Like when we had all the lettuce in California washed in one sink, years ago, and then there was a huge outbreak. Like we're kind of in that same position with nursery stock for cannabis, where it's all coming from one part of the state, and we're having now issues. And viroids and other things are highly likely, so we need to decentralize production, and Lake County has large-scale production here for all the reasons that Jen said in terms of acclimated plants and new revenue streams for farmers. We have operators here who may be considering starting up commercial nurseries to diversify their businesses, meet local and statewide need. And in many other places, we see nurseries very well suited in more industrial zones, not just out in farmland. Just to reiterate, nursery starts are not flowering plants. Industrial zones can be very well suited for commercial nursery production and adjacent to processing facilities or other uses. So we wanted to open up to those manufacturing, more industrial zones with the minor use or the major use in the case of C3.
And so that's why I was going to expand upon, and why we have added those more industrial locations is because these are small 6-inch plants that you will often see stacked on rolling carts with lights on each shelf. So it doesn't need necessarily agricultural land or even natural sunlight. And so are we going to have discussion on, I think it's beneficial to have task force discussion on each type as we go through it.
Go ahead.
So I would open up to task force to talk about this specific type of license and where we would collectively like to see it.
I think we've got a lot of growers in the area who like making babies. So they have their mother plants and they're very good at clipping and making babies, and they may make more than than they can possibly plant. And what you end up with is plants that are acclimated to our unique weather situation here, and potentially additional revenue streams. So I do think this is an important addition.
I like the idea of having nurseries here, just keep the money in Lake County rather than go down and spend it down south, but also it almost seems like a relatively safe and harmless business, growing little baby plants, but I hope we can find areas we can fit this in and do this, because I do think it would be really beneficial for the county and the growers.
I think that some of the fears that are typically associated with cannabis farming are not present in this this license type. I don't know that I've ever heard of a nursery break-in or so I think, you know, whether those fears are fear-based or, you know, how you feel if they're true or not, they simply just don't exist with this type of license.
I recognize there can be a range, but can you just roughly quantify the price per start or teen or whatever that a commercial operator might pay, just to give a ballpark on what?
Yeah, so I typically buy plants in about 2,000 plant lots because I diversify through many different nurseries, and I will get, typically my clones will come into me about $5. My teens, which are a 24-inch plant, will be anywhere between 11 and 14.
Okay.
So I think that the question that I have is first for any modifications that can come out of this. If you're getting this type of license that you're saying, okay, it's the nursery or part of a nursery, right? Is there any kind of modifications that has to happen, I think, to it while you're doing this? As far as for construction, most of my concerns are all like ground disturbance. What other additions and modifications have to happen in construction?
So I think it would depend upon how that particular nurseryman wants to, whether it's greenhouses or you know, light up structures or indoor. And so from there, we're just offering the pathway at this point, and then I believe we're going to go back and work on development standards.
Okay.
And so the development standards would follow, like if you're indoor, you know, the fire department's going to get involved in your inspections and water and humidity equipment that's being used.
These recommendations, just to clarify, open up industrial zones, you're probably gonna see people building on top of something that's already paved. For these zones that we're opening up specifically here today of these recommendations. So it would be, you know, some greenhouse, indoor, these zones are paved pretty much.
But we're not gonna find them as temporary 180-day buildings?
No, this is something that has to happen year round.
Yeah, they would be just
to note that in all zones, they would require either a minor or a major use permit. So they'd still be going through full agency review.
Okay.
Yeah, if it requires an initial study, if it's not an existing building that could be categorically exempt, then AB 52 notification would be required.
Are there any other questions with the task force? Did you want to open up the section then for public questions?
I would like to do it that way if we can.
Good. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Any from the public have questions about type 4 permits? Go ahead, Holly.
Not sure who else is in the house.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
This time you can. Okay. So I don't have any issues per se with the type 4 nursery. My question is more that you have type 1, license type 1, 2, and 4 all on the same line. And I thought that 1 and 2 are minimum 5 and 20 acres. And I didn't know how many 5 and 20 acre M1s and M2s that you might have out there, or should they be on separate lines?
I think we'll cover that when we get to development standards.
Actually,
Yeah, we could
appreciate the clarification. Yeah. So when we have recommended in C3, M1, M2, and MP and PDC, are you saying that you would like the type 1s and 2s to also expand to those areas, or were we just talking about 4?
Just 4 exclusively.
All right.
I think I understand Holly's question in the fact that type 1 and 2 are cultivation licenses, so there's a minimum acreage required, a ratio of how much they can cultivate per how much land that they have, and that allows the size of it to grow. With nurseries, we do not currently have that ratio established, or would we need?
And sorry, Holly, I'll let you finish in a second. So for additional clarity, then, if the task force makes any decisions on type 4 that is solely for type 4, we'll just add another line. So it'll just be type 4.
Okay, that's exactly what I was asking.
Okay. Thank you, good point.
Yeah, the original one had it broken.
Yeah, I was trying to follow with the county's existing zoning table,
Totally,
so as
yeah,
to
yeah.
not confuse people, but we are discussing a distinct, narrow, new use for nursery that would not follow the same cultivation limitations.
Good, yeah, that's better clarity. Okay. I don't see, Holly, is your hand still up or did you just not put it down yet? Down, okay, let's keep going to the next one, please.
So Jennifer,
I actually cannot raise my hand on my computer right now. I don't know why it's not allowing me to, but I do have a comment. So when we talk about vertical integration into Lake County, how important that is for our community and for our economic development. You know, this I think plays a critical role in that. Right now, we are we're processing and doing procurement for a ton of different cultivations. And right now, including my own personal cultivation, we are probably outsourcing for, I would say, 90% of the genetics that we are using. So this would increase the economic, this definitely would increase the economic, I guess, a positive economic environment, and it would be definitely supportive of vertical integration because, this is a huge thing. I really, I see this as very beneficial.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, we're going to keep going.
I do want to clarify one thing, actually, just to correct myself there on that ratio. There is a ratio for type 4 licenses. Would require 20 acres of land for 22,000 square feet of nursery space. So by opening it up, something to consider before we make a full motion, by opening up to more industrial areas, that ratio of land does not exactly translate to those zones. So just something to consider.
Yeah, let's keep that in mind.
That is a
when we
development
do the
standard.
Development standards.
We can get to it. Okay.
22,000 square feet or 2,200?
22,000 square feet of cultivation for 20-acre parcel. Okay, next.
My question was if we wanted to look at approving or not approving per recommendation versus doing it at the end.
Oh.
Because if we don't get through them all and then we have to make the actual recommendations at a different meeting, that would not be.
Absolutely. And we actually have everybody here, so it'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. That way we will at least get through as many as we can get through.
Then are there any additional questions or comments? I don't see anything in the room. How about Zoom? No, we're good? Okay, then we'll go ahead and accept a motion for discussion.
To approve.
We need some exact language on this, right?
Please.
And to approve the LCCA recommendations to increase the zones where type 4 is currently allowed. You want me to go into
To include
APZ, TPZ, RR, SR, M1, M2, MP for minor use permits and for major use permits C3.
Good, and PDC.
I'll make that motion or second it.
Second, excellent. So the first motion was made by Nara, seconded by Jan. All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries.
Look at that.
We are moving, yeah. Next. Type 13? No, 13.
Next slide.
It's gonna be annoying.
Okay, type N, manufacturing. So this is the type N license where they are making topical products, infused products, types of cannabis products other than extracts or concentrates. So a type N license may also package and label cannabis products on the licensed premises. So we're not talking volatile chemicals or anything like that here. Currently, I don't understand.
You don't have any changes or?
Yeah, no changes. Sorry, I got all excited to talk and then I'm like, I have nothing more to say.
I was wondering where you were gonna go.
I was like,
All right.
yeah. All right, so, and currently in our previous recommendations, we moved it to C2, C3, M1, M2, and PDC. So I would recommend just staying with what we've already done.
in which case we do not need any action unless somebody disagrees with that.
Do you need to open that up to public comment?
Any
That's-
questions from the task force? Seeing none. Any questions, comments from the Zoom room? Seeing none. No actions necessary on that one. We'll just keep going.
Next slide, Andrew.
Same thing,
Same thing. Type P manufacturing, no new changes.
which I think we just discussed.
Yeah.
Good.
Jan?
Excuse my ignorance about this, but is the word concentrate and something else that's excluded, is that when you're using like volatile chemicals like alcohol and all that? And the others are just boiling it for, say, butter? Or what's the difference in the two?
So,
I can go into it a little bit.
yeah, and I was just gonna say, so there's no conversion of the cannabis at this process. And then when we get into manufacturing, there's volatile and non-volatile, which are separate license types.
So with
This is drying, trimming, packaging. Yeah.
My question here would be, are we sure we don't want farmers to be able to do pre-rolls on site, because that would be a type P?
They technically can
They can't.
already.
Under cultivation,
Mhm.
do that type P.
Because they're not converting the product into any other format of product.
Unless you do an infused pre-roll.
Correct.
Because you're bringing, if you bring something on and then you're,
Unless you're using your own keef
yeah.
as just straight keef or lemon keef.
Yes, and with the updated DCC regulations, processing is considered a cultivation activity, just straight processing of flower. So
Does that satisfy your,
Yeah, I'm still, I'd still like to see some farms be able to wash.
oh yeah, you're still on bubble hash.
I'm
That's,
still on bubble, I'm still on my bubble soapbox, yeah.
and
But
that's,
that's not this.
that's not this.
That's type 6, yeah.
Yeah.
But the issue is at the state level, when you get the higher level manufacturing license, if you get a type 6, then you're able to do these other uses. You're able to do type P and type N under a type 6. Is continuing to have it be prohibited at the county level end up
Well, I think when we get to type 6, we can talk about that.
But I mean, to your point, just.
It's not prohibited, but we're not on that slide.
Yeah, right, I mean, I think that's, anyway, yeah, sounds like we'll talk about it in a minute.
Let's get there.
Yeah, next slide.
We will soon.
Next slide,
Okay.
Andrew.
okay,
Look at that. So let's talk about it, Nara.
Okay. So type 6 is using non-volatile, what the state considers non-volatile methods for extracting cannabis concentrate. The state includes ethanol and CO2 as a non-volatile substance, or other forms of alcohol as a non-volatile substance. So that I do think we may want to go into that maybe in development standards. But if you have a type 6, then you're able to do type N and type P according to the state. So if you're extracting on site, making bubble hash, which is also called washing. That's when you're using ice water and usually a washing machine to separate the trichome heads from the plant, and then you would lay that out flat to dry, and that would be hash at that point.
So as I see it, we are already allowing it with a major use in the cultivation zones. I think what I'm hearing from you is that we need to make sure that the local definition is in alignment with the state definition.
And the development standards.
And then, yep.
And I have a question on this. I guess, so my chart that I have pulled up shows a recommendation to have this be expanded to include MP as well. That's just what my chart shows, but this says no changes recommended, and it's currently not allowed in MP.
Did I screw up?
So my question is, recommending or not recommending?
I would definitely want to see it in MP.
Okay, so this slide's just,
No.
there is a recommendation and it would be to expand it.
Yes.
Correct. The chart is the Bible.
Okay.
Just FYI, as we go through this, the chart is the Bible, and there, we will find some incongruities. So thank
I
you for
take
bringing
full,
that up.
this is Sarah, I take full responsibility. It was very complex to move back and forth between all these things. So we'd like to modify this recommendation to expand this use to one zone, which is MP, which we don't have very much of.
But the MP district is industrial park, so
Yes.
it'd be just the impact, as far as the project's impacts of noise, odor, things like that, it would just be a one step above, or it'd be similar to our heavy commercial and manufacturing zone.
But we do have concerns with the use of ethanol because it is a flammable material. And the same with CO because it's a high pressure system and the probability for failure and injury is significant.
Yeah, and that's why hence my soapbox on the difference between those particular solvents that the state considers non-volatile and something that the fire department might consider non-volatile, like water.
So you would advocate for that distinction being made during development standards?
I think so.
Okay.
And that may be, and I may at that point advocate for that being like a minor use permit because it isn't, it is water and ice. So.
Now, a major use permit, they would have to get signed off by all county agencies, correct?
And have a hearing.
Including the sewer system, because the alcohol or ethanol in the sewer system could be very devastating. So.
Yeah, they both go to all agencies, it's just that the minor use permit is heard before a zoning administrator and the major is heard before the planning commission.
So do you want to make a modified recommendation here, Nara, that bubble hash be considered for minor use permit in all zones where, once we bring the definition into alignment with DCC, in all zones where type 6 is allowed, that bubble hash could be made under a minor use permit?
I think that'd be great.
I don't think that's here. Today
Right
we're just talking
now,
about the
yeah,
zoning.
we're
But she's
just,
saying minor use permit, which is a zoning recommendation.
Yeah, but we're not going to talk about specifically to include bubble hash and all of that. We'll talk about bringing the definition in alignment when we get to it.
There's
Which
two
we-
different things. She's talking about changing the definition and then changing the use permit. And if I have recommended a
Right.
change of the use permit type on any other slide, I showed that. So right now it's a major use
Last
permit.
motion.
We're not changing the
let's
definition at
go
this
back
time.
to that at
though.
number 5. That's
Okay.
talk about permit types. So right now, we'll just stick just to zoning so we don't spin off in too many like subtopics.
Yeah, understood.
Okay.
I'll make the motion. I move that we accept the recommendations by the LCCA with the exception of moving, including the MP zone to the major use permits
For type 6.
for type 6.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye or both. Looks good. Well, I didn't look on this side fast enough. Were there hands raised? General consensus? Yep,
Everybody
ayes.
said yes.
Okay, good. That passes. Thank you very much.
If we are gonna talk about minors at that point, we can modify it.
Yeah, when we get to the permit types, item number 5, let's stick on that one. Yeah, just remember that. Okay, what's next?
Type 7 manufacturing, so this is where we're talking about using the volatile solvents as defined by the Business and Professions Code. This is where, the type 7 at the state level has development standards, especially as it relates to structures, all of that, we fall in alignment with that. Currently, it is allowed in M2, and we are advocating for a major use permit in M1 and MP. So again, keeping those in those manufacturing zones, like process.
Because I'm serious, I'm great. They're out there remote and yeah, they don't impact our communities.
And type 7 includes butane, which is I think the major,
Major infractor.
yes.
So just so the task force has an understanding, uses that are permitted within M1 are manufacturing of electrical instruments, computers, grains, veggies, fruits, wood, paper pulp, fabrics, textiles, leather products, and metals, glass, plastics, pottery, and rubber products, just so you can kind of visualize what M1 is.
And MP is an industrial park.
Yep.
Somebody want to make a motion, or do we have any discussion
Do
from?
we have any questions in the task force? We do things.
Sorry,
Wow.
I got excited. We're like on a roll.
Anybody in the Zoom room want to speak? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the task force. For a motion.
I'll move to accept the LCCA.
Sounds so great.
So excited.
Sorry.
Okay.
I don't think I had my coffee, and I've got to work on a caffeine headache right now. I'll move to accept the LCCA recommendations to include M1 and MP into the base zones allowed for a major use permit for type 7 cannabis manufacturing.
Excellent. Maybe a second.
I will second that. That's quite a mouthful.
Right? Okay, good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Type S, this is shared manufacturing. This is where there is a licensed facility and they are able to, other licensees are able to license that space. Basically think of it as your commercial kitchen where people rent time. You still have to be licensed on both sides of it, meaning that the person who's renting the space also has to be licensed. We don't have this license in this county. And we're recommending it to be wherever manufacturing is. So where type 6 or N is, which is an M1, M2, MP, and then a major permit, use permit where type 7 is M1, M2, MP. So this would be in conjunction with those manufacturing licenses.
So my only concern with the shared manufacturing is the incompatibility of different chemicals they may be using, or their knowledge and experience in using it. So if we have one using butane, some using N-propane, some using ethanol, that's one of the concerns is you have kind of this warehouse, you let anybody come in and do their manufacturing, is that there's got to be some type of standard licensing guaranteeing that they're using compatible equipment, or you're not going to have incompatibility because you're using a chemical, you don't triple rinse that process that you're using.
Nope.
Can I respond really quick?
Sure.
This is how the zoning connects to that. So this is Sarah Bodner speaking, and one reason why we recommended that if you're doing non-volatile processes, then you would go through the minor use permit for a shared facility. And if you're utilizing any of the type 7 processes, which are considered volatile, then you'd have to go through a major use permit. So
Right,
that there would be far more extensive
I
review.
mean, I understand all the permitting there, it still comes down to that instability of somebody using incompatible chemicals in there, and then not knowing the experience that anyone's in there. Like I said, I've had my nightmares, and I showed you guys the ones in Middleton. I mean, that was, a miracle that it never blew up. And our concern in the fire is, that probability. And there are areas that, there's not a lot of impact in our communities, but I would, I'm not sure how else on the major use permit we could look at the compatibility of those processes before they actually are granted the ability to go in there and to start cooking.
I think that would definitely go in development standards then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I know that
That's
when these are submitted to the state, they have to submit their actual SOPs and the entire process of how everything is handled on the facility grounds itself. And so I think it would be a good time to look at those standards as well.
So in the major use permit, because I don't think we've gotten any, is that something we would get that packet as well? Or is that something we'd have to request?
And you'd be I've been on site at a number of inspections for just even type 6, not even type 7.
Okay.
Fire department comes in with building and says, if that's the cabinet where you're storing stuff, that's not secured to the ground, it's not far enough away from here, we want it to have this level of door, this kind of, material, and you're not, and there won't be able to have those materials on site until that approval signed off by fire and building.
All right, I'm going to trust you on it. Just kidding.
I think it's a really important question, and I just want to add a little context to why we're proposing that we include this. I think it was just an oversight because initially there wasn't a lot of demand for this type of license when Lake County was originally developing the facilities use. But we're seeing, a lot of shift in the market and a lot of contraction, and it may be that shared manufacturing is really important for local producers. And so we wanted to enable that use type. Just on a personal note, I use a commercial kitchen for my own business outside of cannabis, and And so I have experience working in these, and they really provide the opportunity for smaller businesses to manufacture without that hugely high overhead cost. And that's the goal here, is to make this possible here in Lake County in the suitable zones for manufacturing. And we may see that people want to stop sending their stuff out of county to be manufactured, or those manufacturers may or may not still be in business going forward. So to create that potential avenue here in Lake.
No, I support it. I just want to make sure that, you know, we're safe because we're.
Absolutely, yeah. And I wasn't saying that in response to you. I was saying that for this item, why we're having this discussion, because we think it's important to have that possibility here in a county that could be really vertically integrated.
Yeah. Type S is a newer license type. It's only been available the last like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
So, and it was that acknowledgement that you could have a homegrown, pardon the pun, a homegrown brand, right? Somebody who's small, who's interested in looking at this and just, doesn't have the overhead to go through the upgrading of a facility themselves.
Are there any further questions in the task force? Are there any members of the public who have a question or comment about manufacturing type S?
Well, I actually did have one other thing, sorry to drag it. So, I've tried to get environmental health kind of involved because, you know, when you have over 50 gallons of accumulated materials, it triggers the 6.95 hazmat business plan. And then if you have, over 1,320 gallons of petroleum products, that's the spill prevention countermeasure control plan, and those other parts might fall under the CalArc. So, but I haven't gotten anything from Craig or environmental health as we go through these processes. When you've exceeded those chemicals, if we find in our inspection, then we're going to trigger them. But is there an early activation where environmental health takes notice of the chemicals that are being?
I do. Sorry, I can share personal experience. I just worked on a use permit. This is Sarah speaking. And during the agency review process in any use permit application, it's sent out to all of those agencies, and they read through the plans that pertain to their jurisdiction. And I just got comments back from environmental health over fuel storage of a certain amount, and they specifically weigh in on that.
Okay.
I happened to have met Craig at a conference 2 years ago, and this was something he brought up to me. And I would like to see actually that department give a presentation to cannabis farmers, because I don't think people are aware of the CUPA laws that do affect not just farming, but everything. And I think that it's important for us to either learn how to stay under those minimums or maximums, or if we are at those thresholds, to learn what's required to have that amount of fuel stored.
Well, the new service program, we have access on our phone to pull up that account, and then it gives us the map and the quantities on hand. So when we roll from that target hazard, we know exactly what's in there, who their cleanup company is. So, I mean, I know it's a little bit of inconvenience for you guys, but it makes it so much easier for us because we know what we're responding to.
And that could totally be in the development standards, these, and in the conditions of approval
That'd be
as
awesome.
well. Just the standard storage limits and whatnot, and maps of them.
Yeah.
That's why I got rid of all my generators.
I would like to add one comment for a little peace of mind. So long as we're under Maria's direction, we cannot move these use permits to Planning Commission, or I guess zoning administrator for that fact. Most of them go to Planning Commission without having those comments from environmental health and water resources and public works. So that is our new internal approach. And that's why we are tracking down these comments from these agencies. And Craig's been great about it. So yeah.
Tracking down is a very nice way of putting it. I use the word stalking, just so all the departments know that we really need their input. But Andrew is very diplomatic. All right, so we are done with comments, questions. I didn't see any hands raised in the Zoom room, so we'll bring back type S to the task force for action.
Well, I'll make a motion to accept the recommendations allowing type S facilities wherever manufacturing is allowed. Minor use permit type 6 or N-M1, M2, MP. Major use permit type 7s in M1, M2, and MP.
Just for clarity, we're probably going to do the major use permit, minor use permit at our next item, which is the permitting level. So suffice it to be memorialized on this motion, we're taking in type S on M1, M2, and MP additionally.
Okay,
Is that what you were gonna say?
that's what I meant.
Awesome. All right, do we have a second? Great. All those in favor, aye, raise hand.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Nope, good. Thank you very much, that carries. Next.
Type 11 distributor, this is not self, okay. Just making sure, I get the two confused. Type 11 distributor will be distributing products for themselves and other entities. Currently, we allow this in C3, M1, M2, and PDC. We are recommending that we start allowing this in basically the cultivation zones, which is APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR, if it is a standalone. And then we have some suggestions when it comes to standalone or if it's in conjunction to a licensed cultivation operation. But to us, it makes sense for farmers to be able to distribute from their sites.
Which is allowed under state law, it would just.
It's now allowed, because I thought distributors could not have their own. Like, I always thought that the distributors is sort of the negociant, the broker.
Oh, no.
And everybody's comes to them for custody and testing and sales.
That's how they wanted it to be initially. That was a teaser thing in the initial CanTaskFrce legislation following Prop 64, but it slowly kind of got chipped away at to allow for self-distribution. I think the big distros realized they didn't want to drive all the way to all the farms.
Yeah.
So is there a difference then between a type 11 and a type 13?
Yes.
Yes, very, very different.
Type 11 can go to testing and to retail. Right now, type 13 can only go to a type 11. So if you get a type 13, you can take your product from your farm to a type 11 distro, and then they will take it to testing and to retail for you. This cuts out that potential middle person.
So what we could be looking at then to a current type 11 then could be either distribution of your own product, or you could become that central hub.
Correct.
Yeah.
If like all the South County farmers wanted to, if one farm, had the capability to become that type 11 hub for everyone. Type 11 also has additional requirements in terms of storage and quarantining, and so it requires a certain amount of space, because once the product has been pulled for testing, you have to hold the batch that it was pulled from behind a secure locked location, and so not every farm is going to have the ability to do that. But yeah, if there was one farm in South County that wanted to be a South County depot for that, or then they could do that as well.
And it's a really big deal for a farmer if they wanted to, get this license to be able to bring their product directly to a lab for testing and not have to wait for a distributor to come do that and then bring it back. Like that, the cutting out the middleman is significant, and that's one of the reasons why we made this recommendation.
And I believe that as this comes through, you're actually really not going to see a lot of these on farms that are activating the license to its fullest potential. I have no intention of distributing for other people, but I like the ability to drive my own samples and orders and whatnot. Whereas with the type 13, which we'll talk about now, I can't even deliver my own product to a retailer.
So it's kind of an expansion of a type 13.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But they put it in 11 instead of 13.
Exactly. It allows for marketing too, so the farmer can actually go to the retailer and talk about the product there.
Oh, wow.
And that's one of the ways that it's demonstrated to build brand loyalty is to have the bud tenders know the farmer and meet the farmer, and there's just not really a way to do that now without setting up some sort of a special event through your existing distro.
We have a type 11 in the county already, you said?
Mm-hmm.
The South
We do,
County?
yeah, so just at the top of the slide, it says where it's currently allowed, which is not in the agricultural zones, and we're recommending expanding to the agricultural zones.
Right, but I'm saying there's already a number 11 in the county. Where in
Yeah,
the county?
it's
No, he's asking if there is an existing
Yes.
farm that has a type
Oh,
11
like if
license.
somebody has it.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah.
where?
Clear Lake.
She's on the Zoom room.
Valerie Pang has one in Lower Lake.
Is that the
And then-
water extraction? Off of,
No.
use-
No,
No.
distributor.
This is.
Right next to Agro Lake, the old yoga place.
Oh,
Got that area.
Yep,
Valerie, if we're
and then
misspeaking, let us know.
City of Clear
No,
Lake.
you're correct.
Backroads district.
And we're based out of C3 zoning.
No, I was sort of curious that they were both in my district. I was not aware of those.
Yeah, we're in Lower Lake.
Yeah, near the old HD Day, near up in Indios.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, are there any questions from the task force? Do we have any questions, comments in the Zoom room on type 11 recommendation of expansion into wherever we allow cultivation?
I mean, I do have a comment. We own farms and distributions, and so I have seen a lot of struggle for the farms, counting on these distributors to make it to retail with their product. And I do see the value in having farm brands, and that goes along and supports the vertical integration. That is the main goal of this task force. So I do see that this does support that. It is really, really tough to get a good relationship with a distributor when you have 500 farms in Lake and Mendocino and only so many distributors. Imagine the waiting time that it would take for a cultivation to get to the lab, then to get to their distributor, then to be co-packed, then to get to, wherever it needs to go in the supply chain. So I see this as very beneficial.
Thank you. Don't see any further questions, comments in the Zoom room, so we'll bring it back to the task force for action. And again, we're just talking about zoning districts where it'll be allowed. We're going to cover the use permit level next item.
I'll make a recommendation that we expand type 11 distributor zoning to include APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR.
I'll second.
Thanks, Jan. I was worried for a second.
I don't want to just sweat.
Pause.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Say
Aye.
aye or raise your hand. Anyone opposed?
I'm not opposed. My hands.
You're
just
scratching your ear. Okay. All right.
Don't take her to that auction.
All right, moving on to the next one, type 13 cannabis distributor transport only.
So this is kind of dovetails on what we were just talking about. A distributor, the transport only is for the farmer to be able to take their product themselves to a distributor. They can't deliver to retail, they can't deliver to labs. It's really just a transport to a licensed distributor. We are recommending again to allow this on.
I thought that was
yeah,
transporting all kinds of, everybody else's stuff, like you can do transport. Because then the next one is transport only self-distribution.
Yeah, we didn't change that one.
Okay, so let's focus on transport only, which is
Okay.
your kind of the cannabis taxi.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And that would mirror, the recommendation mirrors the distributor. So enlarging or adding the zoning districts for APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any questions on that in the task force? Hearing none. How about in the Zoom? Seeing none, we'll bring it back.
I do have one question. Cannabis goods, you're talking about only the product. I'm thinking of that van that exploded in Santa Rosa with all that marijuana. I don't know what they were transporting. I'm assuming some propane or butane and all the pot, but there was pot all over this block. We're only talking about plants, right? They're not gonna be carrying chemicals and volatiles.
Finished product that is either ready for testing or for retail. So it could be edibles, it could be flour, it could be drinks, but definitely not any of the inputs that would be combustible.
Yeah, the one in Santa Rosa was part of a honey oil operation.
Mobile honey oil, nice.
They're popular.
Holy cow.
It's like straight up Breaking Bad.
Yeah, right.
When you catch fire, you just gotta make sure you got plenty of Twinkies for the cruise.
Oh.
Okay, with all that valuable input, is there any Further questions? I don't see any in the Zoom or in the room. Let's bring it back for action.
I move that we accept LCCA's recommendation to open up license type 13 to zones APZ, A, TPZ, RL, RR, and SR.
And I will second that motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? All right. That one passes. I don't see any recommendations for the transport only self.
Correct.
Correct.
Cool. Do we need to talk about it or can we skip that one? Skipping? Cannabis processor.
So this, we already have some in the county. This is a license for to be able to take your product to somebody else, off the farm to somebody that can dry, trim, sift, cure, all of those things, except convert it to something other than what it is. So they're not able to manufacture it into distillate or anything like that. This is a great license, especially as we've gone through this temporary building situation, which we've all lived through now. There are facilities out there that can do this work for you rather than you having to build a $500,000 building on your own property. So this is an essential auxiliary license that we need more of in this county, because 9 times out of 10, a farmer will find themselves with not enough dry space. And so these facilities are much needed. We are recommending to add this to C2, C3, M1, and 2 MP. Again, the more manufacturing and commercial zones for this type of process.
That's just for an individual to have a license. That does that tie to facilities, buildings?
This would be, so like you have one in the old Parker
Plastics.
Plastics, thank you. This, same thing.
So the facility has that license?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So then you can call the transport only licensee, and then they can move all your weed to their place to dry.
Yeah, and the I think a better example would be the Adobe Creek processing facility. The Alchemy 29, the former Parker Plastics, does involve non-volatile manufacturing. That's their main focus. But the Adobe Creek, the Adobe Creek processing facility, it went through 3 rounds of applicants. The first round tried to throw every license possible into one giant cannabis complex. Obviously, that was going to require a rezone and a much more complicated process. Then it just kept getting simplified and simplified until it brought it back down to just a straightforward processing license, which can allow for, like it says, DCC cultivator license for cultivators that only trim, sift, cure, dry, grade, package, or label cannabis. So just for some clarification.
Type P then?
No,
How is this different from the manufacturing type P?
Because there's no manufacturing.
Yeah, but type P is.
That's packaging, isn't it? Manufacturing. P?
That is in conjunction with the manufacturing license. You don't have to have a manufacturing license to get this.
Okay.
So one thing I want to point out for the task force, so you can visualize, the C2, M1, M2, MP, those are all more of our higher level manufacturing and service commercial. The C2, though, is where you're going to have your banks, your laundromats, restaurants, flower shops, things like that. So I think that
Changing
just offhand, and I'm not a task force person, so it's up to y'all. But the C2 to me seems more of our main streets. Yeah, and so to have a large concentration of drying cannabis, I think would encounter significant public opposition.
And I can see that. And I know when we had the retail discussions, we were really concerned about that too. And so I think, probably it should be C1, C3, not C2, C3.
C1 is even more main street.
Community.
Yeah, we did not include C1.
Commercial.
Yeah,
So-
as you get lower on the Cs, you start having more of the public walking the street. So more, it's more of your main street areas.
So I do want to bring up one point because, as Jennifer mentioned, we went through the temporary structures for drying on the site at the farm. This would really directly apply to them, having that license for cultivators. You can see it's listed under as a cultivation license, often aligned with cultivators that would want to mostly dry, like process their product on site. And that's where the temporary structures would come into place to help them get to a point where they could build that $500,000 structure on site. So,
But I think that I like the idea of the major for the C2.
I could
Yeah,
I just want to highlight that this license type has a lot of different activities, and one of them is labeling. And so you could have a facility that is not going to do the large scale drying of a product downtown, but I have seen these in downtown cities where people are just doing labeling or packaging of things. And they're in convenient locations for trucks to come by and pick up the product. So I'm not necessarily advocating for large-scale trimming in a downtown zoning, but it could be that packaging or relabeling works well there, and going through the major use permit process could determine if it's suitable for that particular building in that particular.
Right, but if you're gonna grant a license, you can't guarantee that that's all they're gonna do, so you have to look at it objectively, is that
Absolutely.
grant? You know, I mean, I would still like to see the C2 have a major use permit to it.
And I understand, maybe ease of trucking, but I would also argue that our main streets are not necessarily equipped to accommodate trucking and transport activities regularly.
And that will all come out in a traffic study. And I'm not saying like I know of anybody who wants to move one of these into that zone. We're just trying to look at how can we enable economic activity, and if there is the right building and the right operator, I think a major use permit makes a lot of sense in that zone.
Okay, so we'll set aside the permit level for item number 5, but right now then we're just working on the zoning districts. Are there any further questions in the task force? If not, we're going to go to the Zoom room where I see guest. Go ahead, guest. Is that you, Angela?
It is, Maria. Thank you. I agree with you on the C2 zone for this one, just for security concerns. After seeing various break-ins at licensed facilities in bigger cities, I wonder how much security requirements there would be to have one of these in a C2 zone. So maybe that I say I have to agree with you on rethinking it, having it in C2. Thank you.
I see no, thanks, Angela. I see no further hands up in the Zoom room. We'll bring it back to the task force for consideration and action.
Well, I mean, I would make a recommendation for it if we remove the C2.
Same.
Remove altogether or consider more restrictive permitting process?
No, go
And
major
remove-
with C2.
Okay, so that's not removing it, that's making it.
Well,
a
yeah, but I
major.
mean, yeah, when if we're gonna do a modification, is that the C2 should require the major use permit.
And then we'll discuss that.
At the next one. So then the motion here for the zoning would be to approve the recommendations as presented, C2, C3, M1, M2, MP. Is that your motion?
C2 with a minor.
No, so I guess then I should go back and say retract
Okay,
C2.
so this one is kind of combining this item and the next item, which is the level of permitting, which we're not working on yet. We're just working on the allowable zoning districts. So that's a little confusing.
It is,
No.
then we probably just said there's no future confusion, just remove C2. Because otherwise it's gonna,
I think you'd be better off removing the minor use permit language,
Yes.
because we're gonna
minor
determine
or
that
major
language
use permit.
later on all of these.
So I can say minor or major use permit in one of these zones, so.
In order to be able to have the conversation next about zoning, about permit level, you have to approve something that says C2 at this juncture. So if you approve C2, C3, M1, M2, MP as the options that you'll have for the next item, that's what the motion would be to do, right?
So what's our motion?
Chief Cepeda, do you wish to so move?
yeah, like I said, I'm just concerned we're gonna struggle with it later on. But,
It seems like there's consensus around your proposal. When I put this, sorry, this is Sarah Bodner speaking. When I put this together, I didn't know if we were going to be determining the level of permit at the same time we were talking about the zoning. So it seems like we're just disregarding the proposed permits throughout the whole thing, and the task force is going to have the opportunity to go through each zone and decide if you feel minor or major is appropriate.
Yeah, I'll go with it. We're just gonna have to address it in the future in the next slide, because like I said, I don't.
And that's what we've done on the other votes today.
I just don't want to deal with
Disregarded
this a year down the road that we're struggling with the same thing that we should have, resolved here today.
Yeah, it won't go forward without the permitting, whether it's minor or major discussion by the task force.
Willie, I just also want to add, as a planner familiar with our zoning and our community growth boundaries, you could open it up as an option for C2, but I highly doubt, or it could be very difficult to find any C2 throughout the county that you could actually follow through on this. Just a heads up. So unless we change all of our community growth boundaries, which we might
Also
modify them, but I don't.
I would
Yeah.
anticipate strong public opposition.
Yeah, it's going to be a rare
It could be
application
depending
that can
on,
make it to the
that
finish
there could
line.
be some project descriptions that would be better fits, but if you add C2, then staff review of it, unless we prohibit some types of the processor license in C2, it's going to be tough.
I have
To
a
go
question, or not really a question, kind of just a thought. I think we've had significant difficulty getting some of our recs through the Board of Supervisors. Not everybody understands exactly what we're recommending, including the public. And so I guess my part of the question is if including C2 is worth it, if this goes to the Board of Supervisors and nobody understands this major minor use permit and they're like, absolutely, we're just not going to deal with it. Is it worth it to include C2, or does anybody think we might be better off to just recommend C3, M1, M2, MP and not deal with that if, like Andrew said, there's not a high probability that licensees would take advantage of C2 areas?
I hear that, and thank you, and Willie did make a motion. So currently, as the motion stands, it does include C2, C3, M1, M2, MP.
And
Is there a second for that motion, or did we want to further discuss it?
I would like to know, when does this go to the board? Is it going in pieces? Will what we agree here go to the board, and then when we start doing zoning, does that go to the board, or is it all going in one big package?
I think we're going to do it in thematic units. We kind of discussed that like 2 meetings ago, sort of taking the first wad of it, getting it into some kind of helpful package, taking that to the board to see if we're sort of still aligned with them or if they want us to do any sort of high-level tweakings. And then we were going to go back with, was it development standards? I forget what the second phase of it was.
So
Yeah.
I don't think we've discussed the process. This is Sarah Bodner speaking. What LCCA had proposed is that we look at all facilities uses in one batch, which is the purpose of this presentation here today, so that we don't piecemeal just a discussion about the processor license and then a different discussion about nursery, because that has really held us up and made it impossible. We still don't have temporary drying structures for the industry because things got chunked apart into so many little micro pieces. So that was our recommendation, is that this facilities language came forward in total, and what that would include is the zoning where it was allowed, the types of permits, and also the development standards all at once, so that we don't have to hash this out so many times that nothing ever gets done, because it makes it impossible to have a business or have an industry when it's done like that.
Cool.
And a lot of this is new, and the development standards will be new, and whereas cultivation is a remodel, so to speak, and so there's going to be some different heavy lifting with that.
And we had proposed doing all facilities, which is non-cultivation as one batch, and then doing cultivation as another batch. And so we're in the facilities ordinance, which is not cultivation, all the other stuff right now.
so I'd like to retract, in feedback from the other fire districts, they would like to have the C2 removed. That's a consensus for the,
So you withdraw your motion,
Yeah.
Or modifies his motion if you.
or you're modifying your motion?
modifying, yeah, the
Would a
consensus.
motion to allow the recommended zoning with the appropriate permits to be determined later in C2, C3, M1, M2, and MP, would that?
That was the last motion.
No, yeah, that was.
So we now have a modified motion to remove C2.
Yeah, that's
Do we have a
consensus.
second on that one? Will. Okay, this one I want hands clear so I can see them, because I think we might split. All those in favor? Hands up, 1, 2, 3. Anyone opposed? 6-2, okay. And that.
It had to happen sometime.
We're still doing very well.
It is, we're not not going to blows
We're not
over
gonna
this.
agree with every single thing, but we're still moving forward.
I don't know a single person that's looking at that.
Testing labs, no recommended changes. Just like somebody to build one here.
Yeah,
Right?
that'd be nice.
Who's got, you know, a couple $1 million want to throw at this project?
Yeah. Microbiz. Oh, wait. Holly, did you have a comment on testing? We weren't really gonna deal with testing.
No, actually,
She's all over the place.
it's very difficult to see what's going on, et cetera. So what happened in the last thing on the processor?
The last one for processor, we approved C3, M1, M2, and MP by a 6-2 vote.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'll do more like, yeah, sportscaster. Okay. All right.
Okay, Robert.
So we're gonna move on then to micro business.
So microbusiness is a combination. You have to have 3 of the 4 license types that are noted at the top. Cultivation, up to 10,000 total square feet. Manufacturing, one of the 2 types. Distribution or transport only, and retail, either storefront or delivery. Currently, we allow this in APZ, A, TPZ, RL, and RR. We are recommending that you are able to hold this license in C2, C3, M1, M2, MP. The reason for this, we're adding it to those more commercial and manufacturing zones, because you can have your other licenses in any other district. You can have your retail in one county, you can have your distribution in another county, and then get your manufacturing, say here in one of the, and say you've got your manufacturing in C2, C3, M1, 2, M2, 4, and 1, M2, MP. This would allow you to have that Lake County micro business license. It doesn't mean that you're going to have all 3 of your entities at that location.
So would our development standard then be to allow for those subtypes of micro businesses only in the allowed base zoning district? Because we don't currently allow retail in C3, M1, M2, MP, and we probably don't want to introduce a lot of.
So it's that, and that's what's important to note here is it's an overlay. It doesn't.
But sorry, Mariah, that's not true because the recommendations by the task force do recommend those zones will allow retail. So if those are accepted, then that would be part of the base zoning.
That was the incidental retail, right, that we hooked up with the tasting rooms?
Yeah.
You're right, okay.
Yeah, I just want to bring up one fact in Article 27, the very last section, micro businesses allows for distribution, transport only or self-distribution, commercial cannabis cultivation, types 1 and 2, not our larger cultivation sites, and type 6 non-volatile cannabis manufacturing. Those 3 together are what we restrict it to as a county currently.
Good, okay.
While the
so
state would allow for, the 4 major uses, including retail.
Nara made a good point, thank you, Andrew, just that a previous task force recommendation expanded the areas that we could use retail in. And so that's why we're seeing that then reflected here.
And to clarify, we do seek to change those development standards that you just referenced, Andrew, this is Sarah speaking, to allow all of these different qualifying activities per the DCC's definition of a microbusiness license.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out.
Compliant with base zoning.
Yeah, our current ordinance has a very confined formula for what a microbusiness would be. It's pretty restrictive. And that's why we don't really see them too often.
Exactly.
So just opening it up again, type 3, 1 acre outdoor for a type 3 license. That's the majority of what we see here in this county, and they're not included in that list. It's just type 1 and 2.
Well, they never will be because you can't have more than 10,000 total square feet cultivation and qualify for a micro business.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So I think what's important to note here is this is just a piece of paper that allows vertical integration for somebody who might have 3 of these 4 different license types. It's not introduced. So they still have to go through the process of getting their cultivation, their manufacturing, their distribution, or their retail license. So they still are held to that zoning, those development standards, et cetera. This is a piece of paper at the state that just simplifies really some licensing hoops.
Question?
But when you look at the C2, I mean, because we already had that discussion about what the state calls non-volatile, which is flammable. I mean, that would be my concern in the C2, would be that the manufacturing part of it.
But they're not gonna, this doesn't,
If you can't do
supersede-
manufacturing already in C2, you wouldn't be allowed to because of this.
Correct.
yeah.
Each
Yeah.
one of those individual activities has to be compliant with the zoning for that use.
It's
And
supposed to
then-
be approved by the state and the county.
Will?
So you're already gonna have your 3 licenses that have gone through the whole process, and then this is just a piece of paper saying that you are a micro business, and it just basically just helps on the administrative side at the state level.
So question, I understand that if you have more than 10,000 square feet, you would not qualify under cultivation as one of your 3 that you'd need. But could you qualify under retail distribution and manufacturing and also have more than 10,000 square?
Yes, you
I mean,
can.
so it's not it doesn't preclude the largest operators who are most vertically integrated from qualifying as micro businesses.
Correct.
In fact, it very much allows for that. If you are so streamlined and so large, there's nothing that prevents you from qualifying as a micro business.
No.
But now it sort of becomes interesting, what is the actual advantage or reason why someone would want a license as a micro business?
So to be honest, and I'll give you my anecdotal personal opinion, this was created prior to the changing of some laws that have allowed vertical integration, that have allowed large-scale farming over 10,000 square feet.
Okay.
I think this was for the person that only had less than 10,000 square feet, that wanted to be able to sell their own product direct and manufacture their own product direct. There's really not a use for this because we have now allowed vertical integration on large-scale farms.
This was a gift, in a sense, to some of the small farmers who were opposing the stacking of licenses, and so they were like, well, you can have a micro business, but they can stack their licenses. And
So I think this begs the question, why are we proposing it?
It sort of does.
yeah.
I was gonna go there.
And
but,
so
yeah.
this is how I'd answer it. I don't think there are a lot of use cases where this would be important for an operator, but there might be a couple. And restricting it in commercial or industrial zones doesn't make a lot of sense. So if we're revisiting the zoning table and we're trying to encourage, vertical integration and economic development in the industry, it makes sense to open it up where it's appropriate. I don't think we're going to see a lot of this.
Yep. And one other thing, Willie, they don't all have to be at the exact same site or premise. You could have your manufacturing and distribution at one location with your retail and say a C2. That might be the only thing that could fall in there. Now, with our current retail recommendations through a use permit, which requires that agency review.
If I could interrupt just one thing, we are at 2:30, which is usually the max, but we are doing some pretty good work here and we only have one thing left after this one. So I would recommend that we finish with item number 4, and then we're going to table the permit types for next meeting, if that's amenable to the task force.
So I have one question. We said earlier, it's not allowed in C2 because of a previous decision. Why would we include it here then?
Well, it won't be allowed in C2. So the only part of this that could be allowed in C2 is retail. And that's because we recommended to allow incidental retail in C2 zoning. But you are not currently allowed to distribute, manufacture, or cultivate in C2, so you wouldn't be allowed to do this doesn't change it, it's just for the retail portion.
Well, then take it out.
You can't because you might have some other allowable use in C2.
Are there any further questions from the task force? If not, we have a hand up in Zoom. Go ahead, Holly.
So my question is, based on everything that you're saying, why even have it down with recommended zoning? Why not just have it be associated with a permitted use? And then it could be in whichever zone it is that the permitted use is in.
I think what's important is because if you're allowed to have retail in a C2 zone, and then you have your cultivation of 10,000 square feet in Sonoma County, and you have your manufacturing in Mendocino County, this would allow you just to hang that piece of paper in your C2 retail spot.
This is kind of confusing because it's like layered permitting, but you couldn't do anything in an individual zone that isn't already allowed in that zone.
Right, but you'd already be permitted in that zone. I mean, you would, you may be in 3 different zones with these different things.
So say an application came in then for manufacturing and the micro business is in C2 and they were doing manufacturing, cultivation, and retail. We would take in, or we would only support the activities that are already approved in that base zoning district. And so their project description would probably best include, we are, doing our cultivation over yonder on ag and our manufacturing over on C3 or something like that. So then we would still be able to take it in. But the department would not support the micro business that proposed activities that were not allowed in that base zoning district.
All right, really quickly, I've got to
Nara.
go pick up my kid
All right.
in Middletown, but I'll get on the Zoom for as long as the service
All right.
lasts, yes.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Godspeed.
Okay, so I do see a hand, oh wait, Holly, is your hand, did you still have a
No, I'll put
question?
it down. I still don't totally understand that because I haven't totally walked through it, but that's fine.
I guess, Holly, just to maybe clarify, if we saw someone come up to the counter and submit this application and they have those other parts of their micro business in other locations, they're just putting their retail in C2, they would just be applying for, retail use and a use permit through that. So it wouldn't necessarily be like they're submitting a micro business to us in that sense, but they would be allowed to apply for that retail in C2 and it would go through the proper review process that we've established as a task force. But on the state level, they could pursue this license, which makes life easier for them.
Okay, got it.
Super. Okay, so if we have no further questions in the Zoom room, we can bring it back to the task force for action.
I make a motion that we expand the microbusiness license zoning to include C2, C3, M1, M2, and MP.
I second that.
Cool, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay, that's 7-0-1, 7 approving that motion, and Nara Delbaca was absent at 2:36. But I'll keep an eye out for her on the Zoom room to see when she reappears. Our last one then for this item is temporary special events.
Ooh, let's do it, my favorite.
And we're just skipping these slides because this was already discussed and deliberated and decided on by the task force, all of the retail.
So temporary cannabis events, in order to throw is the special event license on here at all? After this? It seems weird to go in backwards order. Anyways, nope, okay. So to throw a cannabis event, you have to have a state issued cannabis event, special event license. And then that licensee needs to find areas or locations or venues that have approved temporary cannabis events. So,
I apologize for the notes here that were left in this slide, but yeah, I did not include the event organizer license in this presentation because it's only issued by the state of California. And then for reference, this next kind of wonky paragraph is, I wanted to look up, because it came up in our last discussion, what is the current Lake County events ordinance and zoning, and so that is the link there, and that was sent out.
I had taken that out of one version of this PowerPoint, but a few different versions came through, so this is the one that's up there. To simplify this, you could follow this link to our special outdoor event nonprofit term, so you can get an event permit through CDD as a nonprofit. However, anything further than that would require a minor use permit currently.
Yeah, so essentially what our recommendation is for temporary cannabis events, they aren't allowed until the county decides that they're allowed, but you have to be licensed through the state of California to even propose having one. So someone would have to go through that step before they said, okay, now County of Lake, we want to host one. And what we suggest is that just like the nonprofit special event permit that you can apply for from the county, you could do the same thing for a cannabis event, a temporary cannabis event, and that the county would have its own development standards around that. And we're essentially saying, let's have that be available in any zone, and then the development standards put all kinds of terms and conditions around what it can look like, and you have to be licensed through the state of California. So this would essentially be a bridge to saying you can now apply through CDD in the same way that you can apply for another special event. So like if you had to have an ABC license from the state of California because you're going to serve alcohol, kind of similar. Like you have to follow all state rules and you have to follow all county rules, and CDD signs off on it. And you know, if you do a special event as a nonprofit, the sheriff has to sign off on whatever. There's all those conditions if any of you guys have ever thrown a party. So the zoning is all inclusive here, so that we can open up the process of then what does that application permit look like and what are all the criteria you have to cross off to get it.
Because for Kelseyville in my department, we have permit requirements for any special event. So whether it's Six Sigma doing their bicycle races, and we do have concerns with the consumption of cannabis for, you know, it does alter mental status, and so we do have our permitting that is separate outside of the county because we're a special district, both of us. Mm-hmm. So my only concern is that we would get bypassed with a minor and not get notified of these.
With a zoning permit, we have historically faxed it out or made sure that the signatures, that every interested or stakeholder agency has seen it and already done it. Similar to what we kind of worked out with the ag exempt permit. So that would be fine.
Yeah, as long as we have a process that, you know, anytime you're going to host an event, because I have both the city and the unincorporated, and Joe has all unincorporated, but we definitely want to make sure we had notified and did our due diligence.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. I'm cool with it then.
So currently, a special event, it's a special outdoor event, nonprofit, but we kind of disregard the nonprofit part. And they are currently allowed in ag, RL, RR, SR, and it skips all the residential stuff and starts with C1, C2, C3, CR, CH, M1, PDC.
So we almost align with that. We just suggested a couple others. APZ, obviously, because a lot of cultivation happens in APZ, and it might be an event that's on a farm. And then we added in, I believe,
M2 and MP.
M2 and MP.
Yeah, and which are industrial parks, and not typically a place you would throw a party, but because, you know, it could be hosted by, you know, somebody who's operating in an industrial park and wants to host something outdoor there. So we added a couple of zonings that are different from the county's current zoning accommodations for special outdoor events, mostly because we have to operate in different places than normal people.
And I think what's important to note is like this is the pathway. If there isn't the appropriate venue or ability to host an event in one of these, you know, zones, then it's just not going to happen because there's a pretty lengthy process you have to go through for the event itself. Like we're obviously not going to throw a cannabis cup in M2.
You're not going to what?
Throw a cannabis cup festival in M2. You don't know what the cannabis cup is?
Additionally, current standards or current requirements allow for no more than 3 special events per calendar year on the same site. Mm-hmm. They have specific hours of limitation from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah, I would like to.
To the standards.
Yeah.
And the license holder.
But the zoning permit is not a conditional permit. It's not like a minor or a major use permit. This is one where we have all the criteria and the guidelines already listed in the zoning ordinance. And so long as you're satisfying all of those, it's almost an over the counter. If you come with all the signatures from the stakeholder agencies, then it could be as quick as on the over the counter.
Yes.
Typically not that quick if you've ever hosted an event, just out of personal experience.
Sarah, I would differ because I was about to say I would like to see it is, you know, essentially a ministerial process. However, not cannabis related. We see so many. I've seen a good handful of event permits where they organized, they had the permit, then they didn't realize they need it, and then they're scrambling that Friday before their event. Well, we're scrambling with them to get all those signatures. So when we do get to the development standards and performance standards, I would like to see a time, you know, time spacing, you know, basically 2 weeks out at least, you know.
And it's not just when we were talking about cannabis special events, it's not just signatures from people. It's You have to have all the licensing in place for the event. If there's gonna be any retail or anything like that, all has to be in your plan. You have to have insurance for special events. Like there's a lot that goes into it. So you may walk in and hand a paper across the counter, but it's a rigorous process.
Well, I guess all of that other stuff is development standards and performance standards. So I guess public comment or
Questions
any
from
other?
the task force? Nara, go ahead.
Sure, if I can switch to, I don't even know whether, but we've been working on this at the county fair board, and it's something that we're really looking forward to, is the potential of opening that up. And while that is within the city of Lakeport, and that's where we're going to be handling that, it's really nice to see the county opening this up and embracing this license type, and it's a way to bring the public in to tour farms or to experience, to have some ecotourism. It's a great economic generator for the county, and it's really exciting that we're looking at this.
Thank you. I just now realized we were going to have those big old zoning maps for you. Sorry.
Well, that's perfect for next time when we actually talk about what
Level
kind
of
of
permitting.
permit. Yeah.
So a couple of the zoning districts that are newer to our task force is the CR and the CH. That is resort commercial and highway commercial. So we'll make sure we have those zoning maps for you next time when we can sit. Sorry about that. Okay, so any further questions, task force? Any questions, public in the Zoom room? All right, we're bringing it back to the task force for action.
I'll make a motion to begin to allow temporary cannabis in. Go ahead.
Sorry, there was a hand raised. Holly's hand has been raised.
It was raised, but was it still raised? I never saw it.
I thought it was a new.
Holly, was that a new one?
Actually, I had it raised because I was wondering why we skipped over storefront 10, and you said this was the last one that you'd be speaking about. Because I did want to point out that even though it says that the retail on-site consumption and on-site farm was previously approved by the task force, it was not approved by the task force. As a matter of fact, the March 13th and 27th minutes state that consumption was not spoken about, and it would be spoken about in a future meeting.
Okay.
No.
We didn't take up delivery only or storefront or on-site consumption because there aren't any recommendations for those today. Or retail on-farm consumption. Those were all previous.
It says on this map right here that these were already approved, and they were not.
They were.
Okay, we'll go back and double check those minutes then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I don't see any
Somebody was making a
additional.
motion.
I'll second the motion.
Wait.
Emotion?
Jennifer made the motion that.
She started. I think
Did you finish?
She got cut off.
I make a motion to allow temporary cannabis events in APZ, A, TPZ, RL, SR, C1, C2, C3, CR, CH, M1, M2, MP, and PDC.
Forgot RR.
Did we forget it?
Forgot
It's not
RR.
on there.
It's not okay.
I meant to include it. The zoning table has it, and that is my error.
That's what I copied off of. Was the same. Okay,
Yes.
good. All right. So we have all those. Jan, did you second? Did somebody second? Okay, Jan. All right. All in favor? Task force. Aye. Anybody opposed in the task force room? Nora, I'm assuming you were an aye.
I voted aye, yes.
Okay, awesome. 8-0 with nobody absent. Thank you very much. We are going to table number 5. So we will come back next meeting with some totally nice big zoning maps. And we'll talk about permit types required for license types allowed in the county of Lake or recommended for allowance in the county of Lake.
That next meeting time is at an unusual time. Can we just confirm?
Andrew, when's our next meeting time?
I'm sorry, I'd rather not adjourn at this moment.
We're not adjourning yet?
Yes.
Public comment.
Okay, because I would like to point out we did not discuss consumption lounges, and that's why it is still in this presentation.
So we were gonna take
Yeah, we
action?
did.
When?
No, we
We've
didn't.
never discussed consumption lounges.
It was brought up when we were covering retail, and it was addressed that the board had given a specific direction on what to cover for retail, primarily how it affects C2 zoning. So it was continued, as Holly had mentioned, to
Yeah, at that
be
time,
reviewed
they
at
said they
another
didn't want to
time.
discuss consumption lounges. So now is the time to discuss consumption lounges.
We also have a hand raised in the Zoom room
next
too.
meeting?
We're
Well,
gonna
we
get,
have recommendations for it.
Well, it's just we've run way over.
Yeah,
I'll leave it up to
we're
the
gonna-
task force, but we could start there or continue at the will of the task force.
if anybody wants to keep going right now, or should we
I
close
think
it up?
that's gonna require a lot of discussion.
So
Okay.
I can clarify one thing, which is that consumption lounges are not a new license type. They are, they're allowed under the existing license type of type 10 storefront retail. So if storefront retail is allowed today, that license type also allows you to have a consumption lounge if the local jurisdiction decides to opt in. So it's not a new license type, it's a new sub-use within that license type. So it wouldn't be a change to the zoning table. It would be, because it's already allowed in those zones, it would be it would
Development standard.
change in the development standards to enable that use at the county level so that you could open that use up.
Okay.
But I think it definitely is
It's
more
also allowed with
discussion than
cannabis
just
events.
agreeing with it.
Well, I think it goes back to, that's part of development standards, as we just noted. It's not a different license type.
Okay, so we're not discussing that one today. We're gonna
Correct.
move that one to next meeting. Andrew, you were about to tell us, and Margot and Holly, we'll get right back to you in a second, and Aaron. Andrew, you were gonna tell us the date and time of our next meeting, please.
Yes, our next regularly scheduled meeting is this coming up Monday.
No, it was, sorry, this is Sarah. We moved it to Tuesday because of Monday.
Oh,
being-
correct. Yeah, Juneteenth.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this coming up Tuesday.
Oh.
Let me pull up that
1 p.m. on the
calendar.
20th.
So
I have it
this is
three.
how the current calendar is
Here, that's just
looking.
the regular one. No, this one's the regular one.
So yes, June 20th, Tuesday at 1 p.m.
Tuesday at 1.
And for just to clarify for expectations and the agenda, we will be considering permit type for all of these recommendations. And I guess we're going to hold off the consumption lounge discussion for development standards when we get to that, or performance standards more specifically, actually.
Is there
Sorry, Naria, you're cutting out.
next Tuesday an issue with the Board of Supervisors meeting for staff?
That's a good
The Board of
question.
Supervisors meeting.
I caught part of that. I think what you were saying is there going to be a conflict on this Tuesday with the Board of Supervisor meeting. I'll have to check with Murray and we can get back to you. Again, we'll be sending out a confirmation email 72 hours ahead, or in this case, add an extra 24 hours due to the holiday.
They don't usually meet on holiday weeks, but this is a brand new holiday, so I'm not sure. if
They're
they-
not scheduled to meet
They're
on
not?
that Monday.
Okay,
Or sorry, that
Tuesday. Okay.
good, that opens that up for me then too.
Yeah, I have no conflict on that Tuesday as well. So
Okay, so Tuesday, 6:20 at 13, or at 1 o'clock. Okay, we're gonna move on to public comment section. Margot, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I have a question. So the road requirements for zoning license types, is that covered by the document called SRA Fire Safe Regulations 2020? 14 CCR Division 1.5.
that would be part of it. I believe you're referring to our 4290, 4291 standards. So that is part of it, but not the full conversation. But again, those details of requirements, specific requirements for these different recommendations, again, will be covered in fact, I'm going to go back a couple of slides to give you an idea of what it would look like. Actually, more than a couple. But when we get into this, so this kind of lays out, I guess, a roadmap for the whole task force. We've gotten through our purpose, our vision statement. We're getting through our zoning and our licensing, the applicability. Then we can get into the uses permitted with each of these through either a zoning clearance, a zoning permit, a minor use permit, or a major use permit. Then within that, we'll get into performance standards, which address things like environment and safety. They're more site specific. They relate to air quality and electrical uses, et cetera, as well as development standards. We might want to zoom out first and then zoom in here. They're listed the other way around because that's how most of our articles read for different zones. But development standards, the community and the environment, it's more area specific, it's as opposed to site specific, size, density, setbacks, community growth boundaries, exclusion zones under development standards, then into the real specific stuff, the stuff that a lot of the fire districts are going to be looking at, and very environmental health and water resources. So, some of those will cross over, there's concerns on each side. Then we can get into the whole process of how they start applying for that, which is where our current ordinance starts at this part. It's kind of hard for the users to navigate. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Andrew. I'm sorry, but I have another question. So when we talked about license type 11 for distributor, I have a scenario, and so please help me understand. So in this scenario, a grower has a minor use permit, and then the grower says, "Oh, I want a license type 11. I want to be a distributor." So is a process now that he has to go apply for a zoning? No. According to the recommendations from LCCA and this task force, it's just an add-on to the license operation. But what does that mean?
Well, currently they would have to come in and get an amendment to their use permit, which is very similar to just applying for a whole new use permit. They have to go through agency. Well, first it has to be a complete application, which is easier because they can use a lot of the material they use to get their first project approval or approved. But then they would have to add the additional information required to fully analyze that. Then we would send that out to agency review, our RFRs, request for reviews, to the fire chiefs, the sheriff, environmental health, et cetera, and our AB 52 notifications, where we send it to all of our local tribes. Once we receive those comments, we can determine the appropriate environmental review generally, and it starts with an initial study. So then they'd have to go through CEQA again.
And let's go ahead and summarize.
So yes, they would have to get a new use permit. So
okay, very good. Thank you. I understand.
Awesome. Thanks. Erin?
Yeah, thanks. I know you touched on it, and thanks for giving the schedule out there, Andrew. And I know it's touched on earlier in the meeting. I just didn't hear the complete answer. I know in terms of when it would go to the board, I know Sarah had talked about packaging all the facilities uses together, and I missed the end if there was a determination of or timeline of when this might go to the board and what would be in the first board packet.
Well, it's a whole process that the recommendations from this is Sarah Badner speaking. They have to leave the task force and then go through the agency review that the task force has committed to, and then it goes to the planning commission, and then it goes to the board of supervisors. So I think it's we don't have a clear timeline yet, but
I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Like, when does it start? Like to the planning commission first?
Yeah.
I didn't know if I'd missed anything before.
The Agriculture Advisory Board might want to review it as well, but this isn't really cultivation or anything, so maybe not. But that might be an additional step.
I think one thing to keep in mind is that we are past all of the one-off issues to address coming from the board. So this is really getting into that holistic approach at this point. So it's, in a lot of ways, it's up to the task force to decide how they want to move forward.
Meetings every Monday. Sounds good to me.
And Holly, get your hand up.
Yeah. So once again, it's sometimes hard to really hear what's going on when you're watching on Zoom. So can you explain exactly to me what happened with the discussion on the consumption rooms?
We decided not to talk about it right now.
Okay, but I heard something about development standards and.
Yeah, it's actually it's a possible part of an already existing permit type, and so we're going to talk about it at a later date. But nothing was done on it today.
I take a little bit of exception to that, and I would appreciate if you'd go back and look at the minutes, because during the whole thing, it was stated that the board did not want to talk about it, so it would not be considered. And so to have it suddenly be a tag on to something that was another discussion, I have a little bit of an issue with, but I would just appreciate if you could just review that.
Oh, yeah, I'd just say to that, they tasked us to review retail sales as it relates to C2, where it was an allowable use through basically a zoning clearance. We've addressed that issue. We've completed that task. We didn't get into consumption allowance at that point. We are now, again, like I just said, entering that holistic view so we can address it again, probably most likely in development standards.
Okay, looks like we have no further hands raised. We are going to go ahead then and adjourn the meeting. Thanks for hanging in there, everybody, for that extra half hour. We'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.